How's it going, guys? This is the Core 3 from FightingGamesOnline.info, and I am back with the second part of the first chapter. This one, of course, is going to be going over normals. Okay? So, when most of us start playing fighting games, we often tend to do one thing: mash buttons. And that is understandable. After all, there aren't too many guys that explain what each button does, at least not in most fighting games, which is why that makes sense. So let's take a look at this video. I want to just kind of give you an example, right? This is Capcom Cup 2013's champion Sako, fitted with a eye tracking camera, and basically while you're playing a fighting game match. Now, what you notice, right, if we just, give this a second, is that sometimes he'll basically focus on the space between him and his opponent. All right. Now you might want to know, why this is. All right. One of the most overlooked things about fighting games is the space between you and your opponent. It's within this space that you fight for your control, and one of the biggest tools you use to fight for that control are the same buttons that you keep wanting to mash, which are your normals. All right. So movement, which I talked about in the first video, is about positioning, but attacking is about basically controlling your initial space, and this usually starts with your normals, which is another word for basic attacks. All right. So depending on the character, your normals can be punches, kicks, or weapon strikes. All right. So let me just get out of this real quick, and let's go back into. All right. So once again, depending on your character, your normals can be punches, kicks, or weapon strikes. Now, before we start to break down the different normals we use, I feel like I should explain in more details how basic attacks are broken down, which leads us to frame data. Frame data is the number equivalent of each character's attack in the game. Every attack has a specific animation tied to it, and within that animation, there's a specific number of frames for what you see on the screen. So on a basic level, attack frames are put into three categories: startup, active, and recovery. All right. Startup frames determine how fast your attack comes out. When the attack lands, those are the active frames at work. After your character has, gone back into their idle position before you can attack again, that is the time that it takes for that character basically to recovery, which, that is basically recovery. All right. So I could just give you a quick show right now. Of course, the character that I'm using right now has been just staying in their idle position, right? So if I press the button and they pull out an attack, right, you have to basically wait until they go into their idle position before they can attack again. Okay, so that's basically recovery. Now, the initial frame data only represents an attack before it hits an opponent or before your opponent blocks a hit. All right. And that's important to note because frame data also uncovers what happens after these two instances in particular take place. And it just so happens that this training mode for Street Fighter V actually shows you this. Okay. So let me just put this, so basically let me just go ahead and just hit, and then if you look up here in the corner, what you're going to see basically is what happens when this button gets pressed, and of course what happens on hit, and you'll see +6, right, which is a good thing, right? You'll see +5, right? Now if I switch this to block, you're going to get a different type of number. You're going to get +3, you're going to get +2, right, on block. All right. So basically that is what you get from your frame data. Those are the two main things that you get from frame data. All right. Now, while having an understanding of frame data does give you a detailed understanding of how a character works, bear in mind that there are still things you have to account for, things that I'm going to probably explain throughout this throughout the series. Okay. Now let's go over the different strengths of normals. All right. Depending on the game, normals can have 2 or 3 basic types of strength. In most cases, these strengths are weak, medium, and strong. Your weak normals usually have the fastest attack startup and recovery, and as such are the safest attacks to use in the game. They're often great baiting tools when trying to get your opponent to commit to something and can be canceled or chained into. All right. So basically, I'm just going to go ahead and show you her weak startup, which she actually has a pretty good weak startup. It's, has a nice distance to it. And as you can see, basically comes out pretty quick. And then here you go. I just show you a little cancel here. And as you can see, it can cancel. All right. So that's, pretty important to know about her weak normal. Now, as you can probably imagine, weak normals do have weaknesses. For one, they do a very low amount of damage compared to other normals. But more importantly, they usually require you to be very close to your opponent in order to land. All right. So in my experience, there are two opportune times to land a weak normal. And the first one is basically a knockdown. All right. It's kind of giving you your best opportunity to land a weak normal. All right. The second requires knowledge of your attack range and your opponent's habits. Remember, weak attacks tend to have a faster startup, which means that they can kind of beat out attacks that have a slower startup. But this is not always going to be the case. All right. So, okay. So now let's talk about medium normals. Medium normals are basically the in between, as you might have guessed. They tend to have the startup speed of a weak normal with decent recovery and the distance of a strong one. So as a result, they're often the best tools for controlling space, right? And as you can see here, we got Chun-Li's standing medium kick. And you kind of see that it has a good distance, right? Now, it is pretty good, but the only thing, of course, about this, I believe, is that it can't be canceled into, right? But she does have a variation that does allow for that. And we'll just get into that in just a second, all right? So medium normals actually just have probably one weakness that I can really think of, which is that they can be punished if they miss the opponent completely, meaning that the attack just doesn't land or make the opponent block. All right. And I kind of showed you that, when I was showing you like the second instance that you could probably use your weak normal, you just might have noticed that with Ryu when I was punishing that medium kick. All right. So, of course, the next one is strong normals. And those are basically your biggest risk rewards when it comes to basic attacks, at least. Landing a strong attack can usually result in big damage, and they often control a greater amount of space. So as you can see right here, I'm going to show you Chun-Li's strong punch. And you see it covers a lot of space between him and, between her and Ryu. That's pretty far, So it's a very good normal to have, right? Now, in most cases, strong normals tend to have a lot slower startup. And not only that, they can actually have bad recovery. So it could be hazardous if you miss or you get blocked by an opponent. But, like I said, in her case, her strong normal is actually pretty good to the point that I don't even think you have to, really worry about being punished most of the time. But don't quote me on that, though. Okay. All right. So now all of your normals have three distinct variations that tie into standing, crouching, and jumping. So right now I'm just going to show you a standing high attack, basically. Oh, that was the wrong one, of course. Wrong button. Yeah, let me get you yeah. So this is a pretty good, what I would call a pretty good standing high attack, okay? And let me just reset this. Standing high attacks, they're pretty good for anti-air tools, right? when you anticipate basically a jump attack, and can lead to some advantageous situations as well. All right, so let me just see if I can just give you a quick example here. Think about it. But see, as you can notice, it's kind of allowing you to I could try this other high. This one is a bit more harder to land because it's a lot slower. So you basically get, the idea. Now, they do have their weaknesses, as they don't often hit crouching opponents. And I'll basically just show you basically what I mean. I'll just turn on the dummy here to crouch. And I use the same button I was using right there for, the high kicking button. And as you can see, he's not phased, right? I'm trying to use it and nothing is happening, right? So basically, because of this, this can often lead to a dangerous punish if you keep abusing this over and over again and your opponent is aware of it, all right? Now, in the other case, you have, of course, your mid attacks. And mid attacks are often good for hitting both standing and crouching opponents. So let's just put him back into the crouch position now, right? And then I'm going to use, of course, a button that I just showed you earlier, which was her strong punch, right? And as you can see, it hits mid. All right, so that's what makes this a really good button, is that it covers both, standing and crouching opponents. All right, so if I put him in the stand position, it just covers both spaces basically. All right, so I don't really see too much of a bad thing for mids. Mids are pretty good attacks. They're pretty good normals to have. All right. So, okay. Low attacks can often vary and may require you or your opponent to block in the crouching position. So let me just show you something right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the dummy. What I'm going to do is probably just have him guard everything. And then we're going to try and hit him with a low attack. And if you notice, he's basically getting in the crouching position to block. All right. But if I hit him with this, if I go low like this, as you can see, he's still standing. All right. So that's really what a low hitting move does for the most part. A low hitting move is going to basically make them block low. It's going to, force somebody to block low. Even there's some moves that look like they're hitting low, but they're really not low hitting moves, All right. Now, certain lows actually have more property to them, okay? Especially strong low hitting moves, certain strong low hitting moves basically create a knockdown, all right? And this is important to note because knockdowns give you the best advantage in the game. And I'll get into more details about that in a later video, okay? In some other instances, crouching normals can actually turn into vertical hitting attacks, which are basically another form of anti-airs, okay? Okay. So like high attacks, abusing this variation too much can make you vulnerable if someone anticipates you will use them, okay? So jump attacks are usually the go-to tactic, of course, to deal with this, all right? So it's kind of like, so let's get into jumping, all right? Jump attacks. Jump attacks can be used in many different ways, okay? In most cases, jump attacks work great as reactionary anti-airs, all right? So let's just show you. Let me see if I can. All right. So basically, in other cases, jump attacks can actually hit crouch guarding opponents. All right, so I'll just turn on the all guard here, and what I'll do is I'll turn on crouch, and then what you're gonna notice is that, you know, when I try to go for a jumping attack, Ryu is actually standing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but basically that's how you know that this is basically a can get over basically a crouch guarding opponent. All right, so in most cases, strength determines how a jump attack works. Oops, let me just restart this here. Right, so as you can see here with Chun-Li, her weak attack basically, as you can see, it's kind of going down in the diagonal. That's her weak attack. But then her weak kick is kind of going high, right? Then you have her weak medium is kind of going horizontal. Same thing with her medium punch, and this a medium kick. And then as you can see, her hard punch is once again going in a diagonal. You know, this one is sort of more horizontal, which is her neutral jump. It's different from her actual, her back and forth jump. As you can see, that's kind of going more into a diagonal, okay? So you basically want to definitely take a look at, you know, all your different variations and see, you know, what comes out for each one, all right? In certain games, a jump attack can leave you susceptible to very big punishes if a player anticipates it. And that's because you are potentially vulnerable until you land safely on the ground. All right. And I will kind of demonstrate this. Certain fighting games have a close variation. Close normals are usually tied to standing normals and tend to change the nature of certain strengths completely. So I'm going to use Terry as an example here. Here is the basic strong punch attack. All right. All right. Now I'm going to move closer and do it again. And as you can see, it changes, you know, into a move that hits twice. Now, not only does it change the nature of the attack, but the properties as well. Okay, the startup is a lot faster. It could be punished. It can't be punished if it's blocked, and it also has an additional attribute that lets you cancel into other moves. All right. I think we're going to stop here for now. With this new information, head to the training room or play against the CPU and get a better idea of each normal that you have. You want to find your best attacks and, more importantly, be confident in knowing the ranges of those attacks and when best to use them. Once you have grasped this very important lesson, then you'll really be ready to proceed to the next stage where we'll cover special moves and command normals.